Canto 2, Chapter 3. Those of you that want to look up the verse. 2.3.11. 2.3.11. Srimad Bhagavatam. Pure devotional service. And we'll chant responsively. Etavan eva yajyatam. Iha nikshaya sodayaha. Bhagavat yachalo bhavo. Yad bhagavata sangataha. Etavan eva yajyatam. Iha nikshaya sodayaha. Bhagavat yachalo bhavo. Yad bhagavata sangataha. Translation: all the different kinds of worshippers of multi-demigods can attain the highest perfectional benediction, which is spontaneous, unflinching, spontaneous attraction, unflinchingly fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by the association of the pure devotee of the Lord. Bhagavata Sangata. Purport. All living entities in different statuses of life within the material creation, beginning from the first demigod Brahma down to the small ant, are conditioned under the laws of material nature or the external energy of the Supreme Lord. The living entity in his pure state is conscious of the fact that he is a part and parcel of the Lord. But when he is thrown into the material world on account of his desire to lord it over material energy, he becomes conditioned by the three modes of material nature and thus struggles for existence for the highest benefit. This struggle for existence is something like following the will of the wisp under the spell of material enjoyment. Will of the wisp, what does that mean? Fancy, like imagination. Will of the wisp. Following some imagined idea that happiness is out there somewhere. All plans for material enjoyment, that's will of the wisp. Either by worship of different demigods, as described in the previous verses of this chapter, or by the modernized advancement of scientific knowledge without the help of God or demigod, are illusory only, for despite all such plans for happiness, that's will of the wisp, the conditioned living being within the compass of material creation can never solve the problems of life, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. The history of the universe is full of such plan makers, and many kings and emperors come and go, leaving a plan-making story only. But the pride problems of life remain unsolved despite all endeavors by such plan makers. Paragraph. Actually, human life is meant for making a solution to the problems of life. One can never solve such problems by satisfying the different demigods by different modes of worship or by so-called scientific advancement in knowledge without the help of God or the demigods. Apart from the gross materialists who care very little for God or for the demigods, the Vedas recommend worship of different demigods for different benefits. And so the demigods are neither false nor imaginary. The demigods are as factual as we are. But they are much more powerful due to their being engaged in the direct service of the Lord in managing different departments in the universal government. The Bhagavad Gita affirms this, and the different planets of the demigods are mentioned there. including the one of the supreme demigod, Lord Brahma. The gross materialists do not believe in the existence of God or the demigods, nor do they believe that different planets are dominated by different demigods. They are creating a great commotion about reaching the closest celestial body, Chandraloka, or the moon. But even after much mechanical research, they have only very scanty information of this moon. And in spite of much false advertisement for selling land on the moon, the puffed up scientists or gross materialists cannot live there. And what to speak of reaching the other planets where they are unable even to count, which they are unable even to count. However, the followers of the Vedas have a different method of acquiring knowledge. They accept the statements of the Vedic literatures as authority in toto, as we have already discussed in Canto 1. And therefore, they have full and reasonable knowledge of God and demigods and of their different residential planets situated within the compass of the material world and beyond the limit of the material sky. The most authentic Vedic literature, accepted by the great Indian acharyas like Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, and Chaitanya, and studied by all important personalities of the world, is the Bhagavad Gita, in which the worship of the demigods and their respective residential planets are mentioned. The Bhagavad Gita 9:25 affirms, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan Pitrin Yanti Pritra Vrataha Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Mad Yajino Pimam. Translation: the worshippers of the demigods reach the respective planets of the demigods, and the worshippers of the forefathers reach the planets of the forefathers, Pitriloka. The gross materialists remain in the different material planets, but the devotees of the Lord reach the kingdom of God. Unquote. Paragraph. We also have information from Bhagavad Gita that all the planets within the material world, including Brahmaloka, are but temporarily situated, and after a fixed period, they are all annihilated. Therefore, the demigods and their followers are all annihilated at the period of devastation, but one who reaches the kingdom of God gets a permanent share in eternal life. That is the verdict of Vedic literature. The worshippers of the demigods have one facility more than the unbelievers due to their being convinced of the Vedic version by which they can get information for the benefit of worshiping the Supreme Lord in the association of the devotees of the Lord. The gross materialists, however, without any faith in the Vedic version, remain eternally in darkness, driven by a false conviction on the basis of imperfect experimental knowledge or so-called material science, which can never reach into the realm of transcendental knowledge. And the final paragraph. Therefore, unless the gross materialists or the worshippers of the temporary demigods come in contact with a transcendentalist like the pure devotee of the Lord, their attempts are simply a waste of energy. Only by the grace of the divine personalities, the pure devotees of the Lord, can one achieve pure devotion, which is the highest perfection of human life. Only a pure devotee of the Lord can show one the right way of progressive life. Otherwise, both the materialistic way of life, without any information of God or the demigods, and the life engaged in the worship of demigods in pursuit of temporary material enjoyments are different phases of phantasmagoria. That's another will-o'-the-wisp language. Phantasmagoria. They are nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita also, but the Bhagavad Gita can be understood in the association of pure devotees only, and not by the interpretations of politicians. Not mentioning any names, but sometimes he mentions the names. Or dry philosophical speculators. Go back to read the translation. 2.3.11, for those of you that just came in. 2.3.11. All the different kinds of worshipers of multi-demigods. The way it starts off is kind of perplexing, but the conclusion makes it clear. All the different kinds of worshipers of multi-demigods can attain the highest perfectional benediction, which is spontaneous attraction, unflinchingly fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by the association of the pure devotee of the Lord. Or you can say it, and not otherwise. Only by. Eva, certainly. Bhagavata Sangataha. That's the association of pure devotees of the Lord. That enables one to gain or receive or develop. Udaya is the word that's used, word for word. Develop the highest benediction, Nikshayasya. Highest benediction, unflinching devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the association of the pure devotees. So the chapter is pure devotional service. And the earlier part of this chapter is description of demigod worship and the results of this and that, the other demigod worship on the material plane. And then comes this one, the operative principle of the whole chapter, which is Bhagavata Sangataha, or Sadhu Sangha. Bhagavata is one in relation to Bhagavan, the Bhagavata, or the devotee, or put the adjective, pure devotee. Enables one, so there's these three categories. There's the worldly people that don't care about anything. And, you know, the top of the pile is material scientist or philosopher. But they really don't know because they don't have contact with Bhagavata Sangataha. And then the worshippers of multi-demigods. And the worshippers of multi-demigods, they have a big advantage, and that is not just the worship of the demigods, but their conviction in the merit of the Vedas. Because the merit of the Vedas gives information of transcendence. But worship of the demigods isn't in and of itself transcendence. It's just another pious version or elevated version of life within the material world. So within this shell of the material world, there are different situations. And so the material scientist, the worldly person that doesn't care about anything, and the worshippers of multi-demigods, different categories of living entities, that they want something. in very simple terms, they want happiness. And happiness has its yardstick. This or that or that. And so some turn to the Vedas for material happiness. Fortunately, the Vedas is compared to a desire tree, kalpavriksha, because a desire tree can give anything. It depends on what you want. You go to the Vedas and it'll take care of what you want. But ultimately, even the Vedic version to take care of what you want is meant to elevate one to the highest perfectional stage. So many people don't know what the highest perfectional stage is, nor do they aspire for it, what to speak of know what it is. However, the good news is, from this verse and this chapter, is association with Bhagavata Sangataha makes it all possible. Then comes this nice teaching that Prabhupada would speak on so many times. There's knowledge and there's transcendental experience of that knowledge, or jnana, vijnana. He would say, vijnana means realization or practical application of knowledge. Jnana, vijnana. And when you work with knowledge, something happens. There you get an experience. Supposing you work with ignorance, you have another experience. The experience of ignorance. Supposing you work with real knowledge, jnana. Jnana, or knowledge, has the explicit impact of diminishing ignorance. Light diminishes darkness. And knowledge is like light. And you apply light to something, and darkness is dissipated. But not only darkness is dissipated, but then you can start to see things through the medium or through the lens of knowledge. Jnana chakshusa. You can start to see what's what. Instead of you don't see what's what. Or you may see something else and think it's something else, but you don't even know that it's something besides what you think it is. It's called delusion. The illusory conceptions of life are very diverse and very compelling. It's called Maya. The deluding potency of the Supreme Lord is awarded to those who want to look away from the Lord. And there are persons that then go a little bit higher. They follow the Vedas to get what they want. And they don't even really know what happiness is, but they want happiness. And so they follow it. They get something. They get an illusory experience. It's probably an unpleasant situation being a demigod, because they know they're not giving the real thing. But people want not the real thing. And so they dispense the not real thing. And they give what people want. At the same time, they themselves are not yet situated on the platform of pure devotion. That's why they're demigods. They're pious. More than very pious, but not there yet. And so they may be awarded a position in the heavenly planets, or even a demigod, awarding material benedictions to others according to Vedic process. But so how are we going to understand the goal of everything? The goal of ignorance, the goal of modern science, the goal of worshiping multi-demigods. How are we going to understand that? It's in the Vedas. But many people read the Vedas and they don't get it. They get something else. So many people read the Vedas. But of those that read the Vedas, they get something else, many. So how are they going to get, what the real message is? the process of descending knowledge through disciplic succession has the potency to awaken real knowledge, and then the application of that real knowledge, Vigyan, the experience of transcendence, that which is beyond the range of material senses. Different people have different things to say about all of that. They can say, oh, silly. Sentimentalists. Show me God. And so forth. But they don't have the power. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the submission. So God is not going to reveal himself to such a person. But to those who have the association of the Vedas and have the understanding of the proper application of the principles of the Vedas, they're receiving knowledge from one who has knowledge. And they're receiving bhakti from one who has bhakti. And so then it becomes possible, as it's saying here, Nikshayasodayaha, Nikshayasya, the highest benediction, Udayaha, the development of that. So the development of that is the perfection of life. When it becomes well developed or matured, then perfection of life through the association of one who has it. It's in the Vedas. We'll say it again. How many different explanations are of what some Vedic text says? Let's take some Upanishad, because I was spending some time of late discussing Madhvacharya, the life of Madhvacharya and our visit to Udupi and so forth and so on. He is one of the four Sampradaya Acharyas who made commentary on Brahma Sutra, because that has become the standard of what you're teaching, my dear Mr. Acharya. So the teaching of Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra, Brahma means that absolute truth, in that sense of Brahma, not Brahma, but Brahma, the absolute truth. Sutra in codes. So what's the explanation of these codes? That defines this sampradaya, that prasampradaya, etc. So prior to Madhvacharya, because the other acharyas of the four sampradayas, the other three acharyas of the four sampradayas, chronologically they appeared before Madhvacharya. And commonly, their commentary, Vaishnava commentary, that absolute truth is a person, commentary, rests upon statements from the Upanishads. So they found the jewel amongst everything. And they illuminate that jewel and hold it up, and that explains Vedanta Sutra, because Vedanta Sutra is the summary of all those Upanishads and the other parts of the Vedas. And they know how this connects with that. And Madhvacharya, in contrast, is the first of the four sampradayas, acharyas, that rested or supported his Vedanta Sutra commentary or Brahma Sutra commentary on Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam. Not entirely, but substantially. And there's a good reason. Vyasadeva compiled both. Brahma Sutra, Mahabharata, and Srimad Bhagavatam, or Mahabharata, Bhagavata Samhita, Bhagavata Purana. So, it's a natural commentary of Vyasa. Why not explain Vyasa's Brahma Sutra on the base of his commentary? That's the logic of doing that. Now, some people don't like it. But some people don't like lots of things. But it explains Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. Because the meanings are often hidden because the desire tree gives something for everybody. And some people that don't want the highest thing, they see something else and see something else and see something else. And they write their commentaries based on that something else because that's what they want. So they're given the intelligence how to see that which what they want. And the people who they're writing for like. So different commentaries. Back to the text, the multi-demigods. Interesting. Etavan. It's a pronoun referring to something previous. All these different kinds of worshipers. Yajatam. Worshipping the various demigods. Or Prabhupada is translating it here, the multi-demigods, because there's many of them, multi-demigods. It's not denigration, it's just a statement of fact. There's multi-demigods. And how are those persons who take that part of the Vedas that speak about the worship of demigods, how are they going to achieve the highest perfection? How is anyone going to achieve the highest perfection from any position? It's through the association of pure devotees. Because what is it that pure devotees have that others don't have? They have pure devotion. Because it's a medium of devotion that one can understand what one otherwise is not going to understand. Or bhakti illumines that which we cannot otherwise see. The Vedas, step back. The Vedas are meant to illumine that which we cannot see. Without see means, the use of blunt material senses, not just the eyes, but the blunt material senses cannot perceive what lies beyond them. For example, very simple. How do we know about the mind? We know that there's a mind exists, but we've never seen one. Or intelligence, or false ego, the subtle body, except for people that have visions of ghosts, most people can't see the subtle body. But we know it exists, so how do you understand that which you cannot perceive, which is beyond the senses? If you understand it properly, you understand it from authority. So psychologists are some kind of authority in the mind. But their understanding is imperfect because it's not coming from a perfect source. So how do you get a perfect source to understand about that which you cannot perceive? Vedas. How do you understand the Vedas? You have to have one who's going to teach you what the Vedas say. Otherwise you get a different idea. The principle of disciplic succession is imperative. It's not optional. Otherwise, one will be misled, or one will be a misleader of others. Guaranteed. It's just default. It's either or. There's elevation that comes from adherence to the Vedas, whether it's demigod worship or the path of knowledge, Gyan, applying speculative process or speculative faculties to understand the Vedas, tarka apratishta, but reason and logic fail. Apratishta. The truth cannot be established by reason and logic. It's just in another dimension. So if you can't use that faculty of reason, we apply reason. We're not unreasonable in our approach to the Vedas, but it's still not perceived in its fullness except through this method of bhakti through disciplic succession. And then it's not like instant, But the process, gradual process of removing coverings and awakening real knowledge becomes possible through that medium of Bhagavata Sangataha. So subsequent verses are going to carry on with the same idea. We'll hear another one of them in a few days. It's a nice chapter, the pure devotional service. Any discussion? You have one. That was quick.
So we were talking about how there are different stages that either you think the goal of life is happiness, and then you move on to the demigod worship and the Vedas, and then you see that the goal of life is to develop a relationship with Krishna and go back to the kingdom of God. So
one qualifier. One will not see that unless and until there's association of pure devotee. If one does those things but doesn't have association of pure devotee, one's not going to see the absolute truth.
So
okay. I'm just qualifying what you said.
So that's kind of where my question is leading, is when there isn't that Bhagavata Sangha, as Prabhupada said, association of a pure devotee. So how does someone with the understanding that the ultimate goal of life is just for happiness and betterment in their personal life, how do they get to that stage of service to Krishna or even service to demigods?
There's only one way. That's what it specifically says. It's not optional. It's imperative. Abhigat shet. It's a must. That's how. Now, supposing that doesn't happen, then they carry on. And they go up and down through the wheel of time.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, thank you so much for the beautiful class. My question, Maharaj, Vedanta Sutra is the summary of the Upanishads.
It's a summary of all the Vedas.
All the Vedas. So the primary purpose of the Vedanta Sutra is only to establish Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
That's your idea. The purpose is to summarize the Vedas.
Okay, that includes all other things as well.
But Vedanta Sutra, like the Vedas, is a desire tree. The Vedas are a desire tree. They provide, you name it. And Vedanta Sutra summarizes, you name it. So now, what's the understanding? Within it is everything, not only one thing. One thing is the essence, but not all persons want the essence. So it includes everything.
And Maharaj, how many sutras are there and which section?
I forget the number. Somebody here know the number of sutras in Vedanta Sutra? I don't remember. You can look it up and tell us tomorrow.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So when I have a question about demigods. So when we heard about Lord Shiva, so we read that when a devotees wants highest thing, if they pray to Lord Shiva, he'll bless them with that. So in this case, what I understand is, so Lord Shiva is considered as demigod, and
Wait a minute, say it again. Your understanding is Lord Shiva is what?
Considered as a...
He has the capacity to deliver transcendence.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
So...
He's also influenced.
demigod.
Oh, he's amongst the demigods. He's one can say topmost. One can say he's Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. He's amongst the Vaishnavas. But I'm editing the preamble because the preamble is leading to a question. And I'm editing the preamble because you got to get the preamble right before you ask your question. So that's why I'm editing.
So my question is, so if one approaches demigod with that intention, with intention of achieving highest perfection, so demigods have the power to bless that.
Does Brahma have that power?
I don't.
Huh?
I don't know.
Yes. We're in Brahma Sampradaya. The answer is yes. Now, those who are carrying, are you a pure devotee? No. Can you deliver knowledge of transcendence? Yes. But you're not a pure devotee. But you can deliver knowledge of, as a representative, less than perfect, but you can deliver knowledge of the perfect. And demigods can do the same.
Yeah.
However, generally their focus is on something else, according to the modes of nature. And they have a specific duty in the administration of the affairs of the universe to give X, Y, Z, according to their designation and their position. They have a capacity to give knowledge of transcendence because they're devotees. They have knowledge of transcendence. Does that address your question or no?
Yes, Maharaj. Means the verse translation says, I think it's according to the context, that if one worships demigods also, but one has to associate with the pure devotee.
Yes.
So, means in that context, I'm just thinking, if one is worshipping demigods with the desire of highest perfection, or demigods have the power to purify their desires and then bless them to highest perfection.
Well, they have the power to give knowledge of transcendence, but generally people don't approach the demigods for knowledge of transcendence. And therefore they get what, according to the modes of nature and their interest, they get what their desire is. Next.
Just extension of that question. I think recently we were reading Prachetas.
The sound is muffled.
Sound is not clear.
Go ahead. Try again.
The Prachetas.
The Prachetas.
Yeah. So what Lord Shiva gave to them is how to worship Lord Vishnu, or
Yes.
the prayers to Lord Vishnu. So
exactly.
He gave what is it considered? Is it considered he gave transcendental knowledge? He gave,
Of course. I mean, song sung by Lord Shiva is his meditation while he meditates on Sankarshan. The Lord of his life is Sankarshan. And he's offering his own prayers, the song sung by Lord Shiva, it's called. It's his internal absorption in Sankarshan, his pure devotion.
yeah. And that's because the Prachetas wanted that pure devotion, therefore Lord Shiva gave that.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted something else, he'd give something else.
Yeah.
They were elevated. They weren't ordinary. Let's see if there's someone else. Anyone else in the room? Because Yes. What?
Har-
You can't hear? What?
It's not clear.
What's not clear?
Sound.
The sound system. Well, we can't do much about that.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thank you for the nice class. The intention of the demigods is not to have the highest level of the devotion. That is what their intention, or that is not the purpose, because they are getting association with the Narada and their pure devotees as such, right? But since they don't have that desire to have that higher perfection, because they are getting association of many pure devotees.
They have mixed desire.
Yeah.
And therefore, their understanding is not... If they didn't have mixed desire, they would be demigods. If they had unmixed desire, they'd be in another place besides demigod. So you used the word at the very beginning of your question, intention. Their intention is not the same as their desire. So their desire is mixed. They have very elevated devotion to achieve the heavenly planets, or to speak of become a ruler in the demigod realm. The very elevated Vaishnavas, but mixed. That's why they are where they are and doing what they're doing. They have knowledge of transcendence. They're devotees. We have knowledge of transcendence. Here we are. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, cool. Up front, in front, yeah.
My question is, in the translation, it was mentioned about the moon mission, moon travel.
About the what?
Moon travel.
Moon travel.
Moon travel. So, is the whole the moon mission and the moon travel, that is, the world is projecting, is it all false? And so, are they not?
I understand your question. Is the moon false, or their travel false, or what's your question? What's your question?
Is the moon travel that the world is projecting, like Chandrayaan kind of things?
Oh,
it's
you're
all
asking a question that Prabhupada spoke about.
Yeah.
Whether they went there or didn't go there.
yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah. And are they lying if they are not going?
I mean, Prabhupada said many times they didn't go. As you know, that's why you're asking your question. Now, you want to know, did Prabhupada lie?
Are the scientists lie? That's my question.
Are the scientists lying? That's your question. Whether they went there or they didn't go there. Many times, Prabhupada, he would stick to his guns, but he gave his reason why you can't go there without having the qualification. And then he would say they brought back some dust. So what a waste of millions, billions, and selling property on the moon, or putting the flag down and declaring this is ours. It's silliness. Without having the adhikar to go there. To go there, they can't stay there because they don't have the adhikar to go there and stay there, so they have to come back. So he said many things. So I'm whether the scientists made a fib and they never went there, it was all a hoax. If that's your question, who can say? They went to the Arizona desert at night and made a movie. Who can say? My understanding, minimally, there may be many other things, but minimally, Prabhupada was very keen on poking holes in the blind faith. whether they went there or didn't, Prabhupada was poking holes in blind faith. Purposely, deliberately, repeatedly. Why did he do that? And explicitly from Prabhupada, why he did that was people have blind faith, and the scientists say, and therefore it must be, because the scientists, that's their pramana. He wanted to poke holes in, direct sense perception and inference by logic, and the conclusions of those. Because if you continue to hold on to having blind faith in those two means of knowing things, transcendence is blocked. Now, some people got turned off by that, but he had a purpose. He wanted to shake the blind faith that people have. Science, if science says it's possible, just like last night, giving some instructions about the soul, ABC. So, is there evidence, scientific evidence that says yes? Although you can't see the soul, so how can you verify? Through direct sense perception. You can't verify by direct, so you have to have another pramana. Parusheya Shabda Pramana. So is there something within, so there are things within science. And one of the examples was out-of-body experiences for people undergoing cardiac arrest where the heart stops and the I don't know the right word, electromagnetic events in the brain stop. The EKG is flat. Body's dead. Heart stops. The brain stops. Body's dead. And then numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers and big numbers of those who come back by proper medical procedures, they come back to being present in their body. And they report what they experienced when they were out of their body, which says consciousness is not electrochemical events in the brain. That's not what consciousness is. So that's verification. Then it may be there's some other explanation. If you're a hardcore scientist, there may be some other explanation, so I can't accept that there's a soul. I can't accept that the seat of consciousness is other than the brain. So it's not proof. You can't prove by science. You can't disprove by science. There's evidence that leads to the conclusion, but it's not conclusive. It leads to that conclusion, but it's not. If you're a scientist, you can't see it and measure it. It doesn't exist. That's science. It doesn't exist. You can't establish that something exists unless you can measure it. So, the subjective experience of people who have been through out-of-body experience isn't verification. It's not science for some people. Okay, we'll end there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.